basis of cryptocurrency is going to be another thriving area. Cryptocurrency has, we don't want to get into the policy aspects of it, the national governments and how they view cryptocurrency. There is wide variation. But cryptocurrency will continue to be kind of very popular with a bunch of people all around the world. Just that this is not the last mile or the financial inclusion wise. It's only a very small proportion. 1% of the population will be using cryptocurrencies and the blockchain and DLTs at the backend. Now, where blockchain still has challenges is perhaps in scalability. And unless you can make it scalable, some kind of applications will not happen. I mean, unless, for instance, you can compete with the credit card industry in terms of 100,000 transactions per second. So that's the scalability that the industry wants. So there we are still found wanting. None of the platforms can deliver that kind of scalability now. So improvement there will have a very, very positive impact on the adoption of the blockchain for the future. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, that's something really interesting. Like I had heard one part of your answer, but for me, the second part was really interesting. Dr. Ashraf, so how do you feel about that?
As Mr. Satish Babu already pointed out, this is a trust enablement platform or paradigm, and and we are at the early stages of the technology stack development. Understanding the potential of this technology then comes to there are multiple aspects to this problem. How do you enable a blockchain world? The first thing is there are aspects like, as Mr. Satish already pointed out, there is scalability issue, and some of them are getting addressed, but massive scalability is still a question. And the other aspect is infrastructure. So one of the primary challenges that we have faced when we started working on consulting engagements is who maintains the network, where does the infrastructure sit, what is the mechanism for management or governance of the infrastructure, such questions. So we need a mechanism to formally define or standardize the governance of the infrastructure needed to enable blockchain applications. Blockchain doesn't work in isolation. It collaborates with other systems, or rather works in a collaborative fashion in a larger context. As he pointed out, the shipment example, it may have an IoT component, it may have a big data component, it may have multiple things, and blockchain becomes a technology platform. Then comes the way in which we leverage this technology to solve a problem. There comes so, for example, in a supply chain, there may be processes and mechanisms which currently run the business, and we may have to go for potential revamp of the business processes. So you need to look at the world or the problem from the blockchain perspective, what it brings onto the table. That's another aspect that we need to. And the final thing, I would say, it's more about regulatory and policy mechanisms which enables things beyond technology. So what I see 5 years down the line, technology may mature, and we may understand a little more into the potential and potentially do some re-engineering around the processes. Some regulatory aspects of it would get addressed, and we'll have a lot of people with understanding, and slowly adoption will happen. That's what I would feel. And it will coexist with many systems that are already in place. It's not going to replace any of the systems that are currently in place, because that's my field. And provided we have a collective and highly focused effort on addressing 4 or 5 of the dimensions that I just mentioned.
Yes, sir. So, well, as you have mentioned in these, there are a lot of variables for blockchain currently. So let's move to the next question on, there are possible for the blockchain, but what are the trends? Like currently it's locked down everywhere. So is blockchain available, or how is it useful in the new normal? Lakhan sir, you have been in the blockchain for the past couple of years. So how was the difference or the transformation?
Well, to begin with,
there was a certain degree of hype around the technology. Like Mr. Satish pointed out earlier, there's this inorganic growth around, or inorganic hype around the whole technology that kind of gave the boom to the whole cryptocurrency space as such. But now, if you ask me, like from 2 years back, 2-3 years back when I was starting off with this, one, I didn't have enough data online. If I wanted something relevant or if I wanted something authentic to know about this technology, there wasn't much to go on with. So that has certainly changed now. Now we have, there's a lot more information out there. So anybody who wishes to, enlighten them on this particular technology can do so. Just a simple search online would do that. But that wasn't the case a couple of years back. The resources were limited, but that has changed. And along with those resources, now there are new concepts in play. There are new networks in play, like the second, Ethereum 2.0, and there are multiple blockchain networks out there. It's not. Ethereum is something that is very popular. People would have at least heard about it, but then there are much more out there. There's Ocean Protocol, there's Algorand. There are many other networks out there that people could actually leverage as on today. But to answer your question as to how will it help in the new normal, well, now this is where what Mr. Ashraf said makes sense, because he said this will coexist with our existing technologies. This is not going to replace anything, at least not just yet. But above all, it's the paradigm. Blockchain or true value of blockchain is only delivered or harnessed where there is trust in the equation. So wherever you've got trust as a component or part of the equation, that is where we could actually enable blockchain and harness its true value. So to answer your question, it would be based on use cases. It's not something. I mean, even in the new normal, there are use cases, but then it isn't like how we move from Oracle DB1 to DB2 or something like that. It isn't that sort of a change that we are looking at. It's purely on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, so on that note, as a student, like as myself as a student, if I am about to enter into the blockchain world, so Google sir, if I'm about to enter the blockchain world, should I start with something as Ethereum, or should I go for from scratch as Hyperledger? So, or are there any? Do you suggest any other stack?
That's a very interesting question. It depends on what is your objective of learning blockchain. If you want to get a job,
sorry, sir.
No.
Also the cost also matters, right, sir?
Can you repeat that question? Cost.
Yeah, sir. As a student, I might not have so much cost also. So, considering all these variables, how can I start?
See, as a student, first of all these technologies are open source. Hyperledger is open sourced by Linux Foundation.
Yes.
Ethereum is open sourced by Ethereum Foundation. And Bitcoin is also available open source. But it depends on what is your base background in computer science. If you are somebody who has learned programming like C, C++, and Java, maybe you have also used JavaScript, then you may find it naturally attractive to go to Hyperledger if you have familiarity with more with Node.js and if you work more with Java and JavaScript. But if you are somebody who is a little bit more experimentative and ready to learn new languages, then you may find the journey to Ethereum more attractive, because Ethereum, the gateway to Ethereum is normally through a language called Solidity, which is a new generation language, which is like, I could say, it's a combination of, it's derived from other languages with properties of C++, Java. Now it is more imbibing the flavors of Java. C++, Solidity is with the latest version 0.7, it is becoming more and more adding lot of features in Java, like abstract classes, more functional features. It's a very interesting journey. But when you look at but now let's look at the case. Let's look at the industry, right? When you look at the industry, the job in the blockchain industry, one type of jobs is what you get in traditional IT companies which has embraced blockchain, like to name Infosys, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, TCS. They are working pretty much on Corda and Hyperledger. They are also working on Ethereum, Tezos, etc. But having said that, they have done massive projects, huge projects on Corda and Hyperledger. So if you're a good Java programmer, you will find the journey to Corda easier. If you're a good JavaScript programmer with good background on Node.js, you will find the journey to Hyperledger interesting. But if you're somebody who is very experimentative with a new language, you will find the journey to Ethereum very interesting. So I would not say that you should start with Hyperledger and do only Hyperledger, or you should do Corda and only do Corda. My suggestion is whichever way you start, whether you start with the Corda way or the Hyperledger way or Ethereum way or Tezos or anything else, finally you should experiment with 2-3 different protocols. That's when you understand different models. Like in the past, when we started career, we had different application servers way back in 2000, 2004 time. We had Apache Tomcat, BA WebLogic, and IBM WebSphere. Right? We used to work on all these servers. We never said we will only deploy applications on. Then those days, Java and .NET were the big, trends in enterprise. Boom. Yeah. So we used to do enterprise applications in Tomcat, WebSphere, and WebLogic. And then .NET came into vogue. So then people started coding along C# along with Java. So for a good programmer, they will never restrict. Even those days, when I started career, I saw we had polyglots who equally fluently wrote programs in C# and Java, or who wrote programs in VC++ and Java. Likewise, even today, there are good programmers. Like Bitcoin is written fully in C and C++. Right? One of the members from the Ethereum Foundation called Charles Hoskinson, he moved from Ethereum and wrote Cardano fully in Haskell, and he also used a lot of other languages. So it depends on what is your focus area, like how you want your blockchain to work. And like one thing I would like to say is there is a philosophy in play. For example, IBM likes to build, or Hyperledger is now, Hyperledger Fabric is always a big stack. They follow a huge platform approach. That's why we see very large-scale infrastructure architecture in Hyperledger. So some of us will find it very interesting. Some of us like the Java concurrency model. They will find Java interesting and Corda interesting. Some of us like the Turing completeness of Solidity. They will like it. So there is space for everyone in blockchain. It's pretty democratic.
Okay, yeah, it's
just to add to that.
Point, sir.
Yeah, just to add to that, having been a student of this technology, having pursued it as a student, rather than worrying about what particular blockchain platform you want to work on, I would suggest that you pick up one programming language or one programming paradigm, understand the basics of programming. That should be the very basic. So you need to understand, irrespective of the language, and the remaining, like Mr. Gokul said, it will be about how experimentative you are with the technology. But then as a base, you should focus on understanding programming paradigms and, the basics of programming as a base. That would go a long way, because having seen some of my peers who didn't really come from a computing background, it was a challenge for them all the more to, understand the concepts and to, looking at the code or evaluating the code or even writing the code at first. For someone who's never done coding before, that becomes a major challenge. So take up one programming language, it's your choice, just go ahead, pick one programming language, learn that, understand the programming paradigms, and then you can build on from that point. That way it will just help you along the way. Different languages at the end of the day are just different syntax. It's just like, it's literally like different language. You can learn how those syntax work. So but then you need to understand the core concepts of programming to actually get into it as such. That's something that I'd like to add on, from a student's perspective, that it's something that I've seen up front. So, so to the aspirants out there, I would say, pick up on one programming language.
Yes, sir. All right. I really do appreciate, like, even as a student myself, I really, like, as I said, I'm a tech enthusiast. So I don't stick to one language, I stick to many tech stacks. So whenever I learn a new language, I start from the basic and I understand the concept, and then I start to build the program. So as I'm saying, when I was searching for blockchain, and I saw a myth. I don't know if it's a myth or not. In future, quantum computing can block or can, what do you say, affect the cryptocurrency, blockchain. Like, as we know, the blockchain has a lot of hash values, and that's the strong, or that's the power of the blockchain. We cannot manipulate the hash values, and every now and then the new blocks are added. So Satish sir, can you point out, like, what's your opinion on quantum computing, since the quantum computing is actually trending silently right now, because it's actually very trending, but it's actually silent for now. Will it affect blockchain?
Yeah, right. Thanks for that question. Before I get into quantum computing, a couple of observations on the previous discussion, because I find it interesting.
Sure, sir, sure.
So, first of all, I think, it's important to, of course, to learn languages, because unless you know languages, you cannot do a line of program. I mean, you can't write a program actually. But then, what makes blockchain very counterintuitive to many people is that it doesn't follow the conventional programming paradigm at all. It is a completely new vocabulary, completely new grammar, completely new concept base. So it would be very useful to keep out the language, maybe in the initial period, look at the core, what is happening under the hood. For example, with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the founding one. It's the best, very, very clearly documented, these white papers and a bunch of other documents. Without even writing one line of code, maybe it's a good idea to understand what is really going on. What is this consensus algorithm? What is PBFT? What is this fault tolerance? So the concepts of blockchain are actually quite fundamentally different from the normal programming that people may have studied in college. So that's going to be a learning, it's going to be a barrier. So it's good to get it out of the way by understanding or going through some of this documentation, understanding what is really going on. And then language, when you take up the language, whatever is language of choice, it becomes actually quite useful. And I should also mention that there are some neutral languages, meaning you can write a high-level blockchain application using something like, say, DAML, that is Data Asset Modeling Language. That's a high-level representation, much more abstract, and you can convert it to multiple DLT technologies, depending on what you have in mind. That high-level model can be kind of instantiated for each of these different blockchains. So you don't even have to bother about the decision as to which am I going to deploy this application on, which DLT. You can we can write an application without binding it to a particular technology, which is actually quite a useful thing. Another thing is, from what Dr. Asher said, what I find interesting is that the real power of blockchain can be brought out when you combine three big building blocks. One is blockchain, one is AI, the other is IoT. When you combine this, actually you're going to get, like the ship example, or there are a number of real life applications, even in this post-COVID scenario, when things are going to get automated without human intervention. What's going to happen is these three big things, when you put them together into an application, that's actually going to bring out a number of very powerful applications in real life. So that's something we probably should also consider. And now coming back to this question of quantum computing, yes, some of the early, because the entire edifice of the blockchain is built on cryptography. Now, some of the cryptographic algorithms are susceptible to attack by quantum computers, because the computing power is magnified many times, because you can through these quantum technologies. But from Ethereum onwards, there's nothing to fear. Ethereum is already, the elliptic curve technology is already quantum proof as far as I hear. So keeping in mind that the blockchain technologies are evolving, just like quantum technology is evolving, they're actually going to be in lockstep. So if quantum computing makes a kind of an advance, the blockchain technologies also will make an advance, because they know what's happening in each other. So I don't think that's a big cause for concern. But if you're going to use old technologies with quantum computing, then you have a risk. Back to you.
Yeah, I agree also. Like, as you have said, sir, if the quantum take a step, I think the blockchain will take 2 steps forward because we need to be ahead of the quantum computing and hack proof. So I agree. So Dr. Ashraf, sir, so you have been hearing for the past 20 minutes. So do you have any comments on the future of the blockchain or the things we have mentioned and also the quantum computing?
Good. Well, on the learning paradigm, I'm in that business for last at least for 3+ years, Kerala Blockchain Academy, and I would say I completely agree to Mr. Satish Babu's point. Understanding the terminology, the jargons, and understanding the differences that it brings onto the table and the capabilities that it brings onto the table beyond beyond the what do you call your basic understanding will help you out to choose where you want to be. So getting an understanding of the umbrella of jargons and then getting a feel of, say for example, people talk about immutability in blockchain. You get a feel of what is immutability, and it's not, blockchain is not immutable. It's difficult to mute, but people call it immutability. So why it's difficult to mute is interesting. It's because of certain way in which you structure, certain way in which you leverage crypto, and people say anonymity is an interesting aspect in blockchain world. So there are multiple interesting concepts. So understand, get a feel of that concept at first, and then if you're really bothered about blockchain, I just wanted to emphasize this point here. Blockchain originally with Bitcoin blockchain, then to 2.0, the Ethereum blockchain, it all got enabled because of the power of the network, which was powered by the notion of a token. Hello?
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay. So the power of the network and the notion of a token. And most of the ledger technologies which is getting corporate adoption today are not really blockchain per se. They are actually distributed ledgers with decentralized applications. So there are two aspects to this game. One is leveraging the power of the concepts that blockchain brings in, which is there with the ledger, and the actual concept of a blockchain where the network becomes critical. And most of the corporate world applications which get adoptions, or enterprise level applications where Hyperledger or such family of technology or networks get adoption, is where there is centralization of power, and there are a few organizations controlling it, or a group of organizations come together and they control the network. But the original concept of a blockchain is more of democratic in nature. So what I want to say is, it depends on, when you learn the technology, get an understanding on the concepts out there, get a feel of what suits you in terms of your programming exposure, your ultimate goal. And if you really want to be in the blockchain world, enabled by the conventional, token economy and that power of network, you may have to choose such a technology, and and if you're really getting into that, to the blockchain, real concept of a blockchain, that's one side of it. The other side is employability aspect. Since the hyper or ledger world is getting more attention from the corporate perspective, primarily because large scale systems, when you build large scale systems either for government or enterprises, they look for technologies that can work in tandem with the existing infrastructure or projects or processes in place. And that's where a big name, a technology which is supported, or rather brought in by a big name or a ledger, would make more sense. So from an employability perspective, maybe a ledger would make sense. From an understanding perspective, you should get your hands dirty with at least one of the true blockchains, is what I would say. And that's all from on the learning side of things. On the quantum things, elliptic curve cryptography, which is heavily leveraged. I was very recently, I was exploring a few papers on how people try to fail the game. And what happens is quantum computing, I would say it's still in the early stages. I know a few researchers from India who are into quantum computing research, and even a single element is like, I don't know, we have very few prototypical implementations, and quantum computers are, I wouldn't call it, is not that a, what do you call, a pragmatic reality. And the challenges that quantum computing brings into blockchain is I would say, like, it's much beyond blockchain. It's not just blockchain. Any cryptographic algorithm where computing, breaking it is compute intensive, quantum is bringing that challenge. So research would advance, and crypto research has to advance and will advance in tandem with what do you call, with the development of quantum computing. And I don't think it will pose a major challenge, because it's more of what do you call, a game played between two domains, where the other side is more compute. We have seen such systems in the past also, where you would feel like, okay, we'll have more computing, we'll solve most of the problems. No, we'll still have. I work in a technology called machine learning. I thought, okay, as more computing comes in, we'll solve all the problems. No, it's not true. The problem size goes up, and you have more complicated ways of looking at things. So what happens is, like, this will continue to evolve. Both these technologies continue to evolve and complement each other, is what I would say.
Okay, so Ashram sir, still the blockchain technology, if a startup has an idea on blockchain technology and they want to make application, or they have an idea as web application, let's consider web application, but the backend is actually in the blockchain. So in that case, but they found the funding and all of the research and all are research is actually online, they can get it, but the funding it's actually lacking. So can you suggest some way or some method on how they can find funds, or what are the methods to that?
Interesting. It depends on, it's a difficult question, but at the same time, I would say, like, very recently I've come across a UNESCO call for proposal. This is primarily around building blockchain applications which will benefit children for their good. Meaning a public good initiative. And it was brought in by one of our advisors, Jinto Mason, and we had a discussion with a few startups, primarily from the African continent. And we helped them out in formalizing all that. So what I want to say is, blockchain per se, the first question that a startup should ask is the problem that I am addressing needs blockchain? And meaning, so is there a multi-party environment where people collaborate and trust becomes one of those pillars of enabling the business? That's the first question. If there is that aspect to it. The second question they need to ask is, what are other technologies with which this problem can be better solved? Right? If there are other ways of solving this problem, and trust becomes an interesting thing. Is trust critical to do this business? If trust is critical to do this business, what are other enablement technologies that can work in association with blockchain, which will give a better business perspective? Having identified that, there may be a technology stack, there may be a research component, which are all in place, and your primary question is on funding. The first thing is does it solve anybody's pain point? So, for example, we started working on agricultural traceability, meaning traceability of agri products, and we got even a Niti Aayog prize called AgroChain long back. And we started working with a few entities. I know like there are multiple companies across the globe. When we were talking about it, there were not even a single company leveraging. It was a conceptual product, sitting in what you call the backyards of a government organization. And what happens is we even work with a few entities and writing white papers. And now, if you look at it, most of it got funded. Primarily because if we can address a problem with a public good nature, right? There are governmental and the what do you call, the public, I mean, organizations that supports public good initiatives will fund such initiatives, will fund such startups and initiatives. One such would be like the recent UNESCO call, and a lot of such what do you call, through the Grand India Challenges program. BARA gives such funds through Melinda Foundation, and we also work on such grant, Kerala Blockchain Academy, and there are other agencies out there. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that's where I wanted to bring in the notion of blockchain per se. In India, as per the regulatory norms, you are not supposed to have supposed to work with what do you call? I mean, even though the Supreme Court allowed, you're still under the scanner when you get into the world of tokens and token economy.
Yes.
But if you have a mechanism but most of the new age blockchain platforms, for example, EOS or Neo or whatever, most of these do have mechanisms to fund good ideas and startups, provided you fit into a regulatory framework where you can accept funding in cryptocurrencies. That's a huge opportunity. Okay. Where you may have to place your business outside India. You may have to get into mechanisms where, without violating the regulatory restrictions and with full compliance to the laws of the land, you should be able to accept it. But that's a larger pool of opportunities to raise funds.
Okay. So, well, yeah, I'd say that's enough about for currently. But I want to know more about yourself. Lakan sir, what was your experience on blockchain, and what was your difficulties faced in this field?
All right. Right before we get into that, just to add on to the previous one, along with what
Sure.
Dr. Akshat just said. So your question was how to procure funding, right? So me currently working in an early stage startup, that's pretty much the same question we ask ourselves almost every other day. So this is one way in which we figured it out, because we do have, we first conceptualized our idea that's there. That's something that we would like to work towards. However, now when it comes to the question of funding, we started hitting all these hackathon circuits. We started putting ourselves out there in hackathons where one, you would get the visibility that you need, two, potential cash prices as well, and three, it's one major learning experience as well. So, because every time you go to a new hackathon, it's a new use case, it's a new program, it's a new problem that you're solving, and perhaps it's probably for a whole different business altogether. So, your perspective on the technology would widen, I'd say, and moreover, you would learn a thing or two. And plus, if you do manage to crack it, you do get the big fat check. So that's there. So that is one way in which potential startups can approach it. Particularly Coda, for instance, they have these programs focused just for startups, where they want to bring up these blockchain focused startup entities to solve for many of their clients' problem as such, or particular problems that they wish to solve. So Coda is one platform that I would say is quite warm in the sense that they are they warm up to each startup that approaches them. They support them to a good extent, because we are currently they are our venture partners as well. So to the extent of support that they give us is just phenomenal. I must call that out. So these are some things that potential startups can look at. Now, to answer your question, okay, what was challenging for me? Well, when I came into Kerala Blockchain Academy, when I started off my certification, so at that point in time, I had not been actively coding for a while. All right, so it took me a little bit to get into the flow of things, as because I was a software developer at one point in time, but then I did deviate away from that career path as such. So the initial there was a little hassle for me to get into the exact flow of things. However, the multitude of projects and assignments that were thrown at us, anybody would fall in line sooner or later. So that was so that's one. And two, like Mr. Satish had pointed out earlier, learning the jargons. It's not just enough to pick up on a programming language or understanding about just the programming paradigm. There is more to blockchain than just coding. Like he pointed out, PBFT, cryptography. For someone who's new to the platform, they are hit with so many jargons all at once. So that could potentially be a challenge. So one way to overcome that would be reading. Constant reading. And over the years now, I've even developed a habit to incorporate targeted reading just on the technology. Earlier, during the day, I would have my regular gadget-based reading. Your TechCrunch and Gadget, anything online. Just keeping up with what's there. But then, ever since I've been pursuing blockchain as such, I've kind of targeted it towards this particular technology, looking for sources where they cover anything and everything on blockchain or crypto space as such. So you would have your Reddit sources, you would have Cointelegraph. There are a number of websites online where you can, they just keep you appraised about what's happening in the industry, or what are the projects, or what kind of R&D is going on, who's investing in what. So especially if you are on an entrepreneurial journey, all those things would actually help you. You just might find a potential client or a potential investor. So I would really encourage people to, start with a targeted reading approach, just focus. I mean, if this is something that you wish to pursue, maybe just inculcate it into your daily reading, just maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes start off, and then it'll slowly grow on you. I hope it does grow on you. So, I mean, it did on me. So, yeah. That's about it. Back to you.
Okay. Google, sir, on to you. What was your experience with blockchain, and what are the difficulties faced in blockchain?
My journey with blockchain has been, I believe, day one coding. That's what help you in understanding blockchain, because first of all, my only difficulty in blockchain is to communicate about the effectiveness of blockchain to people with mindset which is very legacy and which are against decentralization. So otherwise, I didn't find any difficulty in technology. I don't believe also that without programming, you can understand anything about blockchain. Because I don't know how to code that word. The first day at blockchain itself, if you will have a lot of misunderstanding about blockchain if you don't program it. I heard a lot of others talking that Bitcoin and PBFT. Bitcoin has nothing to do with PBFT. Bitcoin uses proof of work algorithm. So that itself comes from a wrong understanding. Secondly, talking about elliptical curve cryptography and quantum computing. Elliptical curve cryptography is susceptible to quantum computing. That is again because of lack of understanding on how cryptography is working. All these misunderstandings can be fixed only if you code it. So, and I heard somebody talking about DAML, Digital Asset Modeling Language. These are purely academic researches. In a day, if you want to build a digital
Hello, sir.
I think we've lost him.
Yeah.
At least the screen, yeah.
Okay, I suppose he'll be back. So, Satish, sir, I suppose you have quite experience in blockchain technology. So, I won't ask what are the problems faced. I would say what are the problems you have seen with others. If you have came across any startups or any companies or any ideas which you have. So, what are the
Sorry,
ideas?
Akash?
You had gone off and now you come back.
Oh, sorry, I had a glitch. So, Akarsh, can you hear me?
Yes, Google sir. 1 minute, sir. Sanjay sir, what we'll do is we'll just come to you after Google sir.
See, the point is DAML is started by a company called Digital Asset Holdings, which has contributed to Hyperledger Foundation. They actually wrote the base code of Hyperledger and contributed to IBM, Linux Foundation, and that's where then later on IBM also contributed, and IBM took the lead in Fabric. But having said that, what DAML is doing is just a high level abstraction. It's just an experiment. There's nothing compared to what you do in Corda. Corda, there is huge, 80% of the banks in Italy are using Corda, and that is written in Java. And 80% of the decentralized finance is written in Solidity. None of this is written in DAML or any experimental languages. So you have to be grounded. You have to be very humble to get started. You have to understand that all this boom in the world of blockchain started when some poor man or poor chap somewhere who did not want to reveal their identity coded everything in C and C++. There were so many people for 20 years, from 1990 to 2010, who wrote all the theories. Without this poor man writing the code, we all call this person Satoshi Nakamoto. If his code was not there, all this talk would have been nonsense. So my point is, if you ever want to get into the real world of blockchain, you have to code. Until you code a blockchain, whatever you understand is just a high level abstraction. Right? We have been seeing so much of abstraction in the world of computer science. This is time to get back to coding. So as I want to say, Gardy Booch, who is the inventor of UML, he is a chief scientist in IBM. He says, not even a single day in his life, there is no day goes in his life without coding. He is one of the who wrote the object modeling language. He is one of the gang of four. So my point is, cryptography and consensus are the root or the base of blockchain, and they will be incomplete without understanding the code in which it is written. It is very easy to imagine about. I recently saw somebody saying about a new cryptographic algorithm who is what.
I suppose we lost him again. Okay, so well, we get the point. What Sir was trying, sir. Like, we need to code. We need to start from basic, and also we need to code. We need to understand all the concepts the blockchain offers. So, back to Sri, sir. So, in your experience, what were the difficulties you have seen or also you have faced? So, okay, you're muted, sir.
Sorry. Yeah. So thanks for the question. So very quickly, first to dispel this issue of is coding important? Coding is of course important, because without coding we can't produce any program. But is coding the foundation? Not necessarily, because the Bitcoin itself was the first document was the white paper, and then came the reference implementation of the Bitcoin. And that white paper is not just a matter of code, because it brings in economics, it brings in monetary policy, it brings in behavioral economics, and network theory and consensus algorithms, etc. So there are many building blocks which were actually outlined in the white paper very well. So the white paper is the base document, and that, in fact, for people like me, I've been coding for the last 30 years. And currently, I'm coding a CBDC simulator in Java, sitting alone in my house. So as a coder, I still believe that it's important to get your foundations right, and then you can, maybe build a much better product with that full insights of what you're trying to do. Now back to this issue of what are the impediments and what are the bottlenecks. Well, when I was engineering some products from 2015, I had a team of about people with me, and we didn't actually face any technical problem. Now, finance, I'm not talking about funding and all that for a startup. Those things are important. So we haven't had any technical problem in building. We have built about 4 or 5 different products. And the difficulty was in bootstrapping ourselves. So in most of these things, there is no teacher who will teach like they do in college. You have to learn all the fundamentals. You have to code. You have to kind of. So I basically had to first of all understand myself what these things were. Then I had to train this team, and that's exactly what I did. So there was no real problem. So we started off with Hyperledger Fabric. Then we went to Ethereum, and on back and forth in these two platforms, we built all these products. So I would say that if you're determined and if you have general good programming problem solving skills, you can actually get started without much problem. Thank you.
Okay, sir. So actually we are out of time. So I have a question from the audience. It's from Deepthi Miss. Ma'am says that she has read few papers regarding using blockchain in agriculture, especially using IoT. How promising is a research in that area? So does anyone want to answer that? Satish sir, you are muted.
I think I was saying that Dr. Ashraf is the right person to answer that.
Okay.
So this is a concept that's in place for at least 5+ years. What I mean, at least we started thinking about back in 2015-16 times AgroChain, and there were multiple papers around it. And even in India, there's a company in Bangalore called. They have, there is a company, I just forgot the name of what they do is they actually like pulses and grains in Bangalore. Srivatsa is the name of the person who runs this company. They do like traceability of a blockchain, and they don't do a lot of IoT. So the paradigm is more of application oriented. It's a good master's project, but when it comes to research, I'm not very sure because I don't see much of a research challenge out there. I mean, it's all about a engineering problem. So IoT, there are multiple types of IoTs which can be deployed in an agri traceability context, which includes right from what we call the agricultural processes, which includes what we call the farmers' best practices. So sensors which can collect data on the farmers' processes. That is pre-harvest procedures, and then there is like kind of the harvest and the post-harvest procedures. So then there, right from the harvest to collecting to go downs to transportation, there are multiple IoT mechanisms that can be leveraged out there. So, but most of these things, so we can't make sensors, we can't design the kind of IoT device or infrastructure. And blockchain becomes a data paradigm for, I would say, the provenance, proving the provenance, or making sure that you have credible data over the platform. So this is a good implementation project. This is a good master's project. But from a research perspective, unless otherwise you get into the game of proving that a blockchain-based provenance using certain types of sensors, or get into the sensor design framework, or problems which leverages, say for example, you may deploy a lot of sensors to track certain aspect of the farm. Then you may come across a decision fusion problem. So decision fusion is an interesting research problem. So what I would suggest is, if this is all about putting together IoT and blockchain to build a system, I don't know, I'm not very sure this is a good practical PhD problem, but more of an engineering problem. And there are multiple offerings already in market, which is even in India. But if you can identify very specific research problems in the context of data, so when you collect data, there are issues with credibility of data, making sure that you combine data in the right way, and way in which you deploy. How do you ensure that you have a collaborative system of sensors which gives you the right data, provides you with the right infrastructure, or when you actually put data into the blockchain, and then while leveraging, and what to be put on blockchain, what not to be put on blockchain. Do you, and where is trust, and how do you make sure that you have trustable, and how do you prove that you have trustable data? So if we can identify research problems in this context and work on those research problems, may be interesting. But otherwise, my baseline thought would be it's more of an engineering problem if you're building an application.
Okay. So I suppose that really answers the question. Now, well, we are actually out of time. So I really thank you all four of you for joining us in the panel discussion on behalf of IEEE Computer Society Kerala chapter. And personally from me, as I said in the starting, I'm the junior most and I'm really aspirant on the blockchain technology. Like, apart from A and ML, yes, they are a separate stack and we can implement in blockchain also. But I really want to work more on blockchain. So I'm really great to be in the moderator of the panel discussion. And I really thank you, every one of you, for joining today's session. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.